This presentation was recorded on October 16, 2021 for the Cargo Connect season and was as accurate as possible on that date. Be sure to check for updated challenge information, rules, and event schedules.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 2021-2022 season of First Lego League Challenge, Cargo Connect. So today we're going to go over the missions. We're going to go over the rules. We're also going to go over some of the changes as well as some of the key points this year to help you have a successful season. So with that, we're going to start with some information for you on the basic season. So to start this year, you have your 2021-2022 season mat for Cargo Connect. Every team gets a kit. It consists of all of the mission models that you see here, as well as the items at home. Everything you have to assemble, everything that you need to build comes in that kit aside from the table, which either you can procure from AndyMark or you can get, or you can build on your own based on instructions from First. So there's a number of missions, as you can see on the field here, numbered 1 through 17, 0 through 17. You can do them in any order you like. You can do as many or as few as you'd like. The field basically consists of 3 portions. You have your mat, so you have the entire area of the field where all the missions sit on. You have your launch area, which we'll go over in a little bit more detail. And then you have the home area, which again, we'll go over in more detail. As you can see here, this is showing the starting configuration of the field with what items start in home and then where everything ends up on the field. So this is just a general overview, and we're going to go into the details about each of the missions in a little bit. So for this season, First has actually created a scoring calculator that's located on the event hub. Link is shown here. Please use this scoring calculator instead of, I know some people like to use third-party apps or other things from other websites, maybe like, TechBrick and a couple of other websites. When you're practicing, I highly recommend you use this scoring app, because in the past there have been some issues with some of the third-party apps, and teams unfortunately find out when they get to the actual competition. It's available to everyone. And again, of course, they also have a paper copy of the score sheet. So if you don't want to use the app, you can use the official score sheet, which is also available on the First website. Now, this will be the same for whether it's an in-person or a remote event. Both of them will use the event hub for scoring. So in the event of a remote competition, the teams will have to submit videos of their robot runs. Obviously, in the event of a local competition, it's going to be filmed. You're going to be competing directly in front of the referees. The idea is that when the team submits the videos, the referees will then review all of the videos at a later date, and then we'll be scoring the matches then. And then there will be a feedback period later on after that event, after the initial submission. So we're going to go into a little bit. First, I'm going to show a video from First about some of the submission requirements in the event of a remote event. And then we'll go into a little bit more details on some of the sticking points we've had last season versus things that I think we can do to help improve the experience and make it easier for all of you.
Check out the link in the top right corner of your screen for the video Troy mentioned.
All right, so we'll get a little bit into now the video submission summary. So one of the biggest concerns we had last season was the quality of the video submissions. And by quality, I mean a lot of teams weren't showing the scoring conditions post-match. The camera was moving or tracking the robot during the match while it was running. We had a lot of issues with like focusing the video, so some blurry videos, and we had some where it was extremely dark in parts of the field, so it was really difficult to see what this robot was doing, what the scoring conditions were, all of which it made it a lot more difficult to score the matches. And it just made it a little bit more difficult, especially with giving feedback to the teams. So we do plan on holding some sort of a practice submission event on providing some additional materials, whether it's from First or locally from from myself or the head ref team here, to help with a lot of the issues that we had with video submissions last year. The biggest piece of information I will definitely say to take a look at is there is the video, and then there's also a paper document in terms of what is required for a video recording submission to be successful. It really does go in depth, and it's got a lot of good information in it. So please make sure that you read it and are familiar with it so that you can help your teams be successful if in the event that we have a virtual event. So basic requirements, unedited video recording of each run, before, during, and after with no pauses or cuts. Now, the match itself, whether it's a virtual event or an in-person event, is 3.5 minutes. But in the case of it's 3.5 minutes, and you have three different portions. You have three different portions of the competition. You have your pre-match, you have your during match, and you have your post-match. Now, in the event of a virtual event, you're recording all three of those, whereas in an in-person event, you're going to be interfacing with the referees during the pre-match. You'll be running your robot during the match, and then post-match, you'll be interfacing with the referees again. In terms of virtual events, we're looking for about 5 to 7 minutes in total. It consists of your pre-match, your match, and your post-match footage all in one video. It's good to maybe work with your teams to try and streamline this process, because you don't want to have a video that ends up being 14 minutes because you may not be able to upload it, or it might be too large of a file. And it also just makes the aspect of having to score it makes it more difficult with having to search for when the match starts and other things like that. If you have mechanisms that like capture mission models that are not in a violation of Rule 4, with your submissions, feel free to submit a picture of the assembly combination to the hub to help with referee clarification. Now, there'll probably be a little bit more information that comes out as we get a little closer to competition. As we learn a little bit more about the hub and what its capabilities will finally end up being, there'll be more clarification on how to submit documents and how to submit videos and all of that information. So during the match, do not move the camera. It needs to be stationary. It doesn't have to be mounted to any fancy tripod or anything like that, but it does have to be in one location. And again, the video recording guidance document really goes into giving recommendations of where the best locations for that camera could be on the field. So prior to robot run, you need to show all equipment and the robot at home point out all the motors. You need to show that all equipment fits in either the small or large inspection area with a height no greater than 12 inches. We're asking that you use a ruler to showcase this. It just makes it uniform for everyone, and it makes it easier in general to score it. This time, you need to show the innovation project model if you do happen to have one. This is the time that can be used to calibrate sensors outside of home. So if you have a light sensor or something like that, and you need to calibrate it on the table, this is the time to do it. If you do this, you cannot interact with any of the mission models themselves. It's not like a time to practice doing a mission before you run. This is the time just to really calibrate sensors. If for an in-person event, this would also be the time when you double check the field and ask the referee to verify if something doesn't look right. Please remind the team members that they shouldn't be touching the table. They should be asking the referee, if they see something that they don't think is correct, or if they have a question about the setup, this is the time for them to ask it. During the robot run, this is the 2.5 minute period that the team is running the robot and completing as many missions as they can. For a virtual event, for a remote event, the biggest thing is to take a look at, to make sure that the video, that the location that you have for your camera provides a clear view of the field with good lighting. We should be able to see the entire field. There are some stipulations in the guidance document for like cutting off corners or like a southwest corner. But really we should be able to see the full field for the entirety of the match. Again, please provide a verbal cue for the run start. For example, 3, 2, 1, Lego, which you would hear at an in-person event, we would provide that verbal cue for you. One of the biggest things is, please do not have anyone walk in front of the camera or stand in front of the camera during the match. If it's just a quick in passing with tagging in and out of teams, that's fine. The issue we've had in the past was some either a team member getting excited and they stand directly in front of the camera during the match, and we ended up not being able to see anything for a good portion of the match. Just as a reminder, for both virtual and for remote events, there's only 2 students at the table at any one time. Again, team members can swap in and out as many times as they like during the match, but it's only 2 students at the table at any one time. One last piece of guidance during the robot run is that directions for mission selection should only come from the students, not the coaches. So by that, I mean, one of the core principles of First LEGO League Challenge is that the students do the work. So any sort of direction as to what mission to do during the 2.5 minute match should be coming from the students themselves, not from the coaches. So you're more than welcome to cheer them on and celebrate their success, but we really want to avoid having the coaches dictating what missions to do during the match. It's really up to the students to decide that.
Hey, Troy, I've got a couple of questions so far.
Sure.
It's a new record. We're 10 minutes in, and now we have, okay, that's pretty good. One question is, who has to do the recording? Can anyone do the recording, or does it have to be a coach or student to do that?
So anyone can do, that's a good question. Anyone can do the recording. It does not have to be a student. It doesn't have to be a coach. It could be a parent. It could be someone, anyone could do the recording. It's just, that person should not be, if that person is not a student, they should not be interfacing with the robot. They shouldn't be interfacing with the table or anything like that.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
All right. So now your robot run is finished. After your robot run. So for a virtual event, do not stop recording. Please don't stop recording. We had a few teams that they stopped the recording and then they realized afterwards that technically that submission wouldn't count, and they had an actually really good robot run. So please make sure that you don't stop recording. Provide a verbal cue for the end of match. So either the match is over, if you complete all the missions that you can do and there's still time left on the clock, you don't have to wait until the very end of the match. You can say, we've done all of the missions that we're capable of right now, and then you can end your match. You want to pan over each mission and speak the outcome and highlight what you think you got points for. So at this point, you can move the camera around the table. You want to have a nice overview shot of the field before you do this, just so we can see an overview of the field and its end state. And then you start moving over the individual missions. For an in-person event, this is when students would review the score sheet at the table with the referees. For in-person, this is when students should ask any questions, because the referees will be going through the score sheet line by line, and the end result is that they have to initial the bottom of the score sheet. In the process of initialing the score sheet, they're saying that it's valid. We're more than happy to spend extra time to explain to the students why we scored the match the way we did. We want to make sure that they understand it, and we want to make sure that if we missed anything, because we're not perfect, that we catch it at the table. Because there's nothing worse than we have a team that comes back three matches later saying that they think something was wrong, because there's no way for us to look at the field. There's multiple matches that have gone on after that, and it's just not a good experience for anyone. So please make sure to help the students understand what the scoring conditions are, and including what the scoring conditions are for each of the missions. So notable changes and key points for 2021-2022. So there has been some things that have changed and some things that are new-ish. So they've changed in the last couple of seasons. I know there's a lot of new people, so all of this might be new for you. But even for the veterans, it's a good refresher. So as Andy brought up before, this is the first year that teams will be officially judged based on gracious professionalism that's displayed at the competition table for each match. That will be marked, as you see here on the score sheet. It shows from 2, 3, and 4 are the standard scores. 0 and 1 are options. In the event that for an in-person event, or even for a virtual, in the event that you cannot make your scheduled time, please in this case, it'll be a head referee or a designated event official, which we're going to sort out exactly who should be the contact chain for that prior to your match, if you can't make it. If you don't do that and you end up being a no-show for your match, you end up getting a score of 0 for that match for gracious professionalism. Again, you get 1 for each match. So in this case, in case of most events, you would get 3 different scores from the referee side. Every team basically starts with 3 and then can go up or down from there based on their interactions with not only within their team, but with the people around them during the match. So home and launch area. This isn't new from last year, but it has changed. Home and launch area are defined as shown below. So you have the home area, which is bounded by the semicircular area on the bottom left corner of the mat, as well as the black area on the side of the table to the west of the edge of the mat, which you'll see a little bit more in terms of the actual mat in a little bit. The launch area is the place where you can launch all of your missions from. The key to note is that the key on how these 2 areas interact with the robot missions is that for the launch area, everything that your robot plans on carrying, as well as the robot itself, must be completely contained within the launch area. And when your robot is completing missions, in order for you to touch your robot by hand, it has to be completely in the home area. And that includes anything that it's carrying with it. We'll get into a little bit more on what happens if you interrupt or touch the robot outside of the home area in a little bit. There's a bit of a matrix depending on what the circumstances were when it actually happened and what the consequences are. So when launching, remember that both home and the launch area are bounded by the inner vertical face of the border wall. So we have a lot of teams, sometimes they'll have these cables that loop out of the back of their controller, or they'll have attachments that overhang the border wall. That's technically not within the launch area, and your team will not be allowed to launch until that's corrected. So you want to make sure that you really pay attention to this when the team's designing the robot, that they're not overlooking this. We have a lot of teams usually that make this error, and it causes a bit of headaches when it comes to the competition time. When returning to home, it's the same thing. If you have a robot that has an extension hanging over the south wall, and it comes into home and they touch the robot, technically that robot was not completely in home when it came back. So that would be you would lose a precision token, and depending on cargo that it's carrying, there's other things that can happen, which we'll get into in a little bit. Another thing to note is that this was a change a couple of years ago, is that all equipment must be stored in home during the match. Separate side tables or bins outside of home are not permitted. Equipment updates. So any software platform can be used as long as the robot is moving autonomously, controlled by the robot controller. That's your RCX, your NXT, your EV3, and your Spike Prime. One thing we did notice with a number of teams last year that had the Spike Prime was that they had a laptop on the field to help choose programs. Having a laptop on the competition field during a match is not allowed. That program selection must be done completely within the controller, which you can manually toggle between the programs, but that has to be done on the controller itself. You can't have it synced to the laptop during a match. So mission model interaction. One thing to note this year is that the container contents, which is mission 2, which we'll get into in a little bit, this year's kit, they provide you 2 sets of those pieces. You're only using 1 set for the competition field. The other set is basically just a spare. Rule 4 has also been clarified from some previous seasons. So you still can't connect mission models to equipment or other mission models by interlocking the Lego studs themselves. The key to remember here is that mission models can be secured together or equipment in accordance with Rule 4. Basically, the way that we've interpreted that is that they can be removed within 1 to 2 seconds without separate Lego tools, and models cannot be broken or disassembled even temporarily in this process. If it is, it's not a valid method for securing a mission model, and you would negate any points for missions that are related to that.
Troy?
Yes.
Have a couple other questions here,
Sure.
and some of them go back a little bit. So before we get too far away, in terms of the match itself, how would you handle ending the mission early, due to accident avoidance or something? Is it appropriate just to say, I think you may have said it, that those are the missions we're comfortable with now, or we're stopping our mission at our run at this point? What's the way to end early?
That's exactly the way to do it. Is if in the event of you see a mission's not going right, and and it's still going to be your submitted video, even if you're not sure and you want to end the match right then and there, the best way to do that is to explain verbally why you're ending the match early. So in the case of we're ending the match early because this is what we can do right now, or we're still working on the remainder of the missions, or you want to give a verbal explanation, and at that point the match ends. Now again, if you're stopping the match and the robot's in contact with a specific mission and you're stopping the robot, then that can also negate points for that mission. It really depends on the situation.
Okay. But if there's something you want to do for a strategic reason to stop, then you need to say so, basically.
Yes.
Okay.
No, the question, sorry, I just want to file, that question's wrong. There is a mission called Accident Avoidance this year, and it's an ending mission. That's what I was trying to correct that. I'm like,
thank you, Shannon.
But that one is an ending mission, just like last year we had to dance or hang. Can you end early if you're doing accident avoidance? That's my question, because that changed as we went last year.
So in that case, no, you cannot. So in the case of like accident avoidance, that is determined at the end of 2.5 minutes, which is the same as it has been which was the similar situation as last year.
Okay, so when the clock counts down, you evaluate that one.
Exactly.
Okay, got it. Another question about cameras. Rob asked, if you have a multicam setup, can we provide close-up shots along with a wide shot of the whole table?
So are you talking, so if it's a video, again, I'm not positive on what capabilities the hub will have in terms of video submissions. I know that the guidance does mention one view. You should be able to also submit pictures, but again, I think we may have to shelve that question until we learn a little bit more about the final details about the event hub.
Okay, I think though that last year there was specifically they wanted one wide shot.
Yes,
but we'll double check that. Okay, thank you, Rob.
That's what they don't want. They don't usually want the videos combined. Oops.
Right. We're almost there, Troy.
no
Can we use a stencil made of Legos to position our robot in the launch area? And I believe that would be a template kind of thing. And I maybe that comes up later, Troy, but
no, that's a good question, actually. So jigs can be used, but they must be completely made of Legos. So they can have no non-Lego pieces in them. They have to be completely made of Lego in order for them to be used.
Right. And you can use it to set up, but you must remove it before you start the mission, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So it can be a jig to position, but it cannot be a guide.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And Mark, yes, 2.5 minutes to try to do 15 missions. Let me cover that. So the idea there is that you have 3 2.5-minute opportunities. Typically, and you can talk about this in the programming class because those coaches will have some opinions about the strategy here, but strategy is really the key. It's up to your team to decide how they can best use that 2.5 minutes. Some teams will say, hey, we're new, we're going to get these 3 missions and we're going to be happy with that. Other teams will go, we got to get a bunch of points here. We're going to focus on, all those high point value things. And some teams will do significantly different plans for each of their 3 runs. Maybe hey, we know we can get these, let's get that one in quick. And then we've got more of a reach one later. Are you expected to do all 15 missions? Absolutely not. Are you expected to do all 15 missions over the period of the 3 different runs? That's totally up to you and the team. But especially in recent years, FIRST has made sure to put some very challenging missions on there so that even teams that in the past may have run, have gotten a lot of the missions, always have something to reach for. So. Okay, Troy, thank you. Well, I'm sorry, it's only one of the runs that counts. No, well, your highest one counts. Okay, so if you've got it's like applying for college. You might want to get that safe school in quick, but go for the reach goals as well. So it's your highest score that gets recorded. Okay, Troy, I'll stop.
Great, thank you, Rick. So we're going to go over a little bit about the interrupted and stranded cargo procedures. It does get a little complicated depending on where the robot is and where the cargo is, or by cargo, we mean anything that the robot is carrying that's not part of the main robot assembly. And by cargo, we also mean really mission models, not anything that accidentally breaks off of a robot. So we end up making a table here that kind of makes it a little bit easier to understand what happens in what circumstances. So as you can see here, depending on whether the robot, when you interrupt the robot, whether it's completely in home or not completely in home, different things will happen. So if the robot is not completely in home and there's no cargo and you interrupt the robot or you touch it by hand on the field, you lose 1 precision token. If it's completely in home, then it's the same as it came all the way back. There's no penalty and you can relaunch as you want. Now, when you have, if the robot's coming back and you interrupt it and the cargo itself is within home, but the robot's not completely in home, you lose 1 precision token, but you can still keep the cargo. If the cargo is in home and the robot's completely in home, then again, it's the same situation, which is you keep the cargo and you can relaunch the robot. Next situation is if the cargo is partially out or out completely out of home and was with the robot during the last launch, and you interrupt the robot and when it's not completely in home, you can keep the cargo and you lose 1 precision token. If the cargo is partially out of home and was with the robot during the last launch, and the robot itself is completely in home, you can keep the cargo and you can relaunch with no precision token loss. The last situation is if cargo is partially out of home and was not with the robot during the last launch. If the robot's not completely in home, the referee removes the cargo from the field and you remove 1 precision token. The referee removes it from the field and keeps it from the remainder of the match. So in the event of a virtual event, that would be either another teammate or someone else can basically, they can pull it off the field and then hold it with them or keep it on the side because it doesn't count anymore and it cannot be used. In the situation where it's completely in home, you don't lose a precision token, but the referee does remove the cargo from the field. So again, by cargo, we mean it's items that are still in contact with the robot. So this is just a nice little table that kind of highlights what all the possible scenarios are for interruptions and stranded cargo. So with that said, we're now going to go on to the mission section of this portion of the training. And we're going to start off showing the video from First Lego League Challenge going over the individual missions.
Check out the link in the top right corner of your screen for the video Troy mentioned.
We're just going to go over a couple of things and then just do a quick highlight over each of the missions, and then we can answer any questions. So for just in general, in the rule book, so the information next to the model and field location pictures, it's not used for scoring. It's just a general description of the mission and how it relates to that year's theme. Please make sure that you take note of any blue text throughout the rule manual that gives you your scoring requirements, as well as any of your scoring conditions or any stipulations for either scoring or not scoring. And again, scoring is determined at the end of the 2.5 minute match unless otherwise specified. So now, take a look. We have an actual field here. So again, for the inspection bonus, you have your home, and the line between the large and small inspection areas is notated by this small red arrow here. Just an imaginary line drawn across home. Anything south of that line is the small inspection area. Anything north of it is the large inspection area. Everything must fit within the large inspection area. If you fit within the small inspection area, it's a bonus. For mission 1, which is the innovation project model, please make sure that you show that to your referee before the start of the match or during your pre-match video portion for virtual events. This model must be built using items that are located in bag 16 that you see here. And the stipulation is that one dimension has to be at least 4 Lego studs in length. Mission 2, unused capacity. Again, please note that you'll see this is how they start. All 6 pieces start in home. The kit comes with 2 sets of parts. You only start with 6 in home. The container itself is located here on the field, not dual locked down or anything. So that's located here, and it's just open and close. Next one is the unload the cargo plane. Please note that the 2 scoring conditions for this mission are completely independent of each other. So the way this mission model works is you just press this lever and you unload the cargo plane. Now, again, please make sure that you pay attention to the scoring conditions on the actual mission itself. Based on where the container ends up, you end up getting different amounts of points, and these containers can be used in other missions across the field. Transportation journey. Truck and the airplane must be in contact with the mat to score per the rule book. So in the case of, you have, say, a piece here and this gets stuck here, it's suspended off the mat. In the case where this is, say, this is suspended completely off the mat, that would not count. Even if it was past the blue line, it's not in contact with the mat, so it does not count. Again, please make sure to pay attention to the scoring conditions, as they really dictate whether you get points or not. And that's pretty much it for this mission in terms of the airplane. And then you have the truck, which is located here, which is the same exact thing. So you have one blue line here for the truck, one blue line here for the airplane. Switch engine. Again, please note that these scoring conditions are at the end of the match. So switch engine. So you want to think very carefully about how you approach this mission, because of the fact that you have the ability to ruin prior completed missions. So if you flip this 2 minutes into the match, and in the last like 10 seconds, your robot comes back and flips it back over, it doesn't count, because it's the scoring condition is the condition at the end of the match, not during. Accident avoidance. In this case, it's a little bit tricky, but you have your yellow, and then if you go too far, the whole item falls over. One thing to beware of this mission is it's very sensitive to motion. If you really just touch it, it really kind of ends up falling. So be very careful. Make sure that your students are very careful with shaking the table, because they could knock that mission over. And it's a very difficult mission to reset. It's in the middle of the field. So you really want to make sure that the students are very careful during the match, that they're not jumping and knocking into the table, or in the process of tagging in and out, they're not hitting the table, because it's very easy for them to knock this over. That's just a little pointer. We've seen it happen in the past with some of these missions. Next one is unload the cargo ship. So in this case, you have your cargo ship over here. Basically what you have here is you have this little trolley here, the crane, and basically you just push it. So this should roll smoothly. If it ends up binding, you may have an issue with these rails. So when you do test this mission, it should roll smoothly side to side, and it shouldn't, or back and forth, and it should not really want to move or slide side to side. It should go back and forth here very smoothly. Airdrop. So this one has sort of like a two different situations here. So in the event of a virtual event, the food package actually starts in base. If you interact, and the food package is shown here, if you interact with the model to trigger it, which is through this lever here, by pushing that, it'll drop the package. Then you automatically get 30 points, which is scoring conditions A and C in the rule manual. For virtual events, then you'll have a neighboring table on the other side of you, bordering you on the north wall, and their food package will be overhanging your field in your home area. So then at that point, the mission works as intended in the rule book. Note that all 3 scoring conditions for this rule are independent of each other. Train tracks. So in this case, you have 2 different mechanisms. The field, it starts with this broken track section up, should drop down without sticking, and the car should be able to roll all the way up and down the tracks smoothly. This is an important one when you're building this mission, to make sure that the track pieces align, because if you don't, it's very easy for this train will just jump right off the track. So you definitely want to make sure that with this mission, when you do lock it down to the field with dual lock, that you follow the placement lines on the mat itself, and that you also make sure that it's built properly and everything's attached properly. In terms of latching, you see this red mechanism here. When you drive too far over, you'll end up having this red mechanism will fold back and then locks it in place. And that's considered latched. Sorting center. So 2 different situations for sorting center. The first one is in the event of a in-person event, we will be rolling we're basically going to use a dice each match to randomize it based on this chart here. So what you have here is that the bottom row is always blue. The middle row is always orange. I know that this looks yellow, but this is something that we do have to address with first, because the field we have has a yellow piece instead of an orange piece. Functionally, they're no different. It's just a color change. And then you have green on the top row. So based on what you roll, that will determine the orientation of all of these pieces. And you can only have one container per row, basically, or per column. And each one is determined based on its color in terms of row. So this chart here kind of gives you what the 6 possibilities are. So if you want to practice, I would recommend practicing with this method and roll the dice before you start your match, because it should be, it's supposed to be random at the start of the match. For a virtual event, prior to the match or prior to video submission, we will determine what 3 positions we want to use. And then that's the way we're going to go. We'll have a little bit more information as we get closer to competition on that requirement. For home delivery, the package must be supported in some way by the doorstep. So doorstep is located as this white piece here. And this here is your package. So that's supported in some way. But this is different point values from this. Fully supported, partially supported, not supported. And the key to note here is that if it's in contact with any equipment, so any team brought components, so baskets for mission models or anything like that, that the robot moves around the field, if it is in contact with any equipment at the end of the match, it's worth 0 points regardless of where it ends up. Next is large delivery. Only the blue holder means not touching anything else. So you have your blade here, and here's your blue holder. That's not touching anything else. This is touching the mat, but again, that's still worth a different set of points, and that's where there's multiple scoring conditions here. This, which is touching the side border, also counts as nothing else, or as something else. So it's really, this is something to definitely practice with to see how the best way to complete this mission is. Platooning trucks. So one truck starts off at home. The other one starts on the field here. Now by latching, there's a small red mechanism here. You push the truck forward. That's latched. The one thing to note is that, as you can see here, it does take some force to overcome it. And also it really depends on if you hit it too hard, it won't latch. So it's really, it's kind of a bit of a tricky mission, and you really have to work with your team to kind of try and figure out the best way to complete this mission. But that's sort of how the latching mechanism works for this. And then the latch for the bridge is the same as the latch mechanism for the train tracks, which is here, and that's latched. (14), which is the bridge. Equipment on center support can prevent bridge deck from fully lowering. So fully lowered. Doesn't count as fully lowered. If this was equipment, it would not count. It has to be fully in contact with the center support in order for it to count as fully lowered. Load cargo. Again, note the blue text. Only 2 containers per form of transportation. So you have your trucks, you have your platooning trucks, you have your train on the far end of the field, and then you have the cargo ship's west deck. One thing to note about this west deck is that it swings. So again, as your robot's placing cargo, it could fall off. It could fall off during the match, and scoring is counted at the end of the match. So it's possible to indeed ruin anything that you may have done in the earlier on in the match. Cargo connect. Again, each scoring condition is independent. And that has to do with the circles that are around the field. So you have a black circle, you have a green circle, you have another black circle here, you have a blue circle between the airdrop mission and the cargo ship, and then you have the cargo connect circle here. So those are the circles that they're talking about when they reference the different scoring conditions on the map. Again, pay attention to the blue container, hinged versus unhinged scoring conditions. Certain scoring conditions require the container to not be the hinged container, and certain ones they do mention the any container. So be sure to take a look at that and note that this is if it says unhinged, you cannot use this container, or this container does not count in that scoring condition. So with that sort of ends the mission highlights. Here's a few key links for you to use that may be helpful based on just the overall season resources, the score calculator, the robot game rulebook. You have an interactive version, which is new this year, so it's a little bit. I find it's a little bit easier to use than to just read through the PDF. The rule updates, which I highly recommend making that part of your team's weekly meeting process, is to continue to check for rule updates. They do get updated as you go throughout the season.
Hey, Troy, maybe this is a good point to stop for a couple of things here. So first of all, we had a couple of questions while you were talking, and excellent job as usual, sir. Somebody asked if the video describing the missions is available for coaches to show students. It certainly is. It's on YouTube. I put a link in the chat, and I put a link on the page on the First Long Island website where we will be keeping track of these links. And that link is also in the chat. We had a couple of questions about the chicken statue. Actually, before we do that, I will try to find, I think you sent me this presentation, Troy. I'll try to get these links up on the webpage this morning as well. and we'll get one-stop shopping there. So back to the chicken statue. Can you go back there for just a second if it's not too much trouble, sir? And the question is, does one of the platooning trucks start in home and the other on the mat? And this is a two-parter. Also, where does the hinged container get loaded?
Okay, so let's start with the chicken statue. So that is large delivery. So let me go back to here. Okay, so for large delivery, you have okay. So the other portion of the large delivery is the chicken statue here. Now that starts off exactly where you see it on the field. So in this case, you've got so it starts off here. It's possible for you to knock it out in the process of trying to get this over here. That is up for your team to figure out the best way to get this blade onto this stand. As you see how the chicken statue is right now, this is how it starts off. Did that answer the question, Rick?
Robin, does that do the job?
Yeah, I wasn't sure what the purpose of the chicken statue was, but I guess it's an obstacle to the large delivery. That got it. Okay.
Every chicken statue I've ever seen has been an obstacle. Also, so Troy, does one of the platooning trucks start in home and the other on the mat? That's another Robin question.
Exactly. So the first platooning truck starts right here in front of the bridge, or just west of the bridge, on the markings here that you see on the mat. And then the other platooning truck starts in home for them to use however they want to.
All right. And Robin's third question there, not that we're keeping track, where does the hinged container get loaded?
So the hinged container, so let's go back to that. So the hinge container itself, hinge container is completely closed. So the fact that it tells you just either partially full or completely full of contents, the key with this rule manual is if it doesn't tell you a specific location, it doesn't matter. So the only thing is, so you can bring this into home. You could load it out in the field. You can pretty much do any way that you want to. You can get this, you can have this container loaded. As long as the student is not obviously reaching out onto the field and grabbing it and pulling it in. As long as the robot is doing it, if it's outside of home, if it's completely within home, the team member can do it. So the way to look at all of these rules is if they don't tell you a specific scoring or a way to do the scoring condition, then it doesn't matter on how you do it. It's what matters is that the condition that they tell you for scoring is met. It doesn't, if they don't tell you specifically how to do it, as long as you're not breaking the mission, then it doesn't matter how you do it, as long as the scoring condition is met.
Okay. Melanie asked if the missions have to be completed in order. No, they do not. In fact, that is sort of the undercurrent of strategy is sort of which ones do you want to choose to do, which order, can you optimize things for your session, those kinds of things. So you've discovered the hidden game within the game. So, and let's see, if a team doesn't choose to place the turbine, then is it true that the chicken does not score, or they scored independently, Troy?
So in this case, if we go to the mission for the chicken and the turbine blade, you end up with the two scoring conditions is that the turbine blade is touching only the blue holder and the chicken statue is upright and within its base. These are two independent scoring conditions. So the key is if it's completely within the base, or the chicken statue is upright and completely within its base, then it does count. With its base completely in a circle, then it counts. If it's whether they move the propeller blade or not. There are two independent scoring conditions. Again, be sure to keep checking the updates as they do sometimes have clarifications as we get closer to the competition season that could partially change that. I don't think that they do. They generally don't do large scale updates that'll change the way a game is played. Unless it's absolutely necessary, but it is really important that I will stress again to please make sure that your team makes a regular habit of checking the rule updates and going through the rule manual and making sure that they fully understand all of the scoring conditions on the field.
So we have a related question, I think, Troy, which is if the container is at home, then why can't you touch it and fill it up yourself?
You can.
There you go.
Let's see, as long as if the rules tell you that you can't fill something by hand, then you can't fill it by hand. If the rules don't say it, or they don't say, sometimes one of the rules that they'll say is this part cannot go past like a certain line on the field or go west of a certain line. They sometimes will have rules like that to prevent objects from being scored if they do make it back to home. So that's the only thing to look for in a lot of these missions is if you see, and the updates, if you see something, some sort of text that says, if an object makes it past, makes it west of this blue line and you extend it down, it doesn't count. That is sort of there to prevent someone from taking an object back to home and then doing it by hand. So that's really the only time that you'll see that. So that's something really to work with your team and kind of go through the rule manual and the updates and see if there's any sort of stipulations like that, because that's the intent behind that.
Okay, moving along here. What are the black lines in the map for? Well, they have no absolute purpose. However, they are very high contrast and could be helpful if one wanted to use a sensor to detect their presence. So that's something maybe to discuss in one of the programming classes, but they have no official purpose or demarcation, but they could be convenient. Let's see. I'm sorry, a little louder?
Oh, sorry. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, so with that little storage container, you can fill it up, but then there's a potential that when you put it down, the items inside of it will fall out.
There's always a potential of trouble.
Okay.
So yeah, as basically it's not locked shut, it's not latched or anything. It doesn't have any sort of sticking point. It freely opens and closes. So yeah, exactly. Depending on how you orient it, that's something to definitely be aware of.
And that has to be standing in a specific direction, or is it just there?
So in the case of this mission, this goes back to, let me go back to it here quickly. The scoring condition is that hinge containers completely closed for the unused capacity, and then the other missions are based on either it being loaded somewhere or in a circle. So it really, if you go through the individual missions, there's a couple of different places that it can be used. And it's just the key to remember is that you have hinged and unhinged containers. This is the only hinged container on the field, but you have multiple unhinged containers. You have gray, you have blue, you have orange, quote unquote. The one we have is yellow, but either way, and you have green. So you have a couple of different options, and really there's a couple of different ways that you can score them. It just depends on what your team wants to do, essentially.
So while we're on that topic, does the blue hinged container need to be on the game board to score and not in home?
So it depends on what mission that you're working on. If you're doing mission 2, the only stipulation is that the hinge container is completely closed.
Okay.
Whereas for other missions, if they involve being out on the field, then it may or may not count if it's in home. So it really depends on what mission you're trying to do.
Okay. Going back to mission 12, large delivery, follow up on previous question here. If a team does not attempt mission 12 at all, they don't touch the large delivery, do they still score the 10 points for the chicken as long as it stays put?
So for this, you have 2 independent scoring conditions. One is based on the turbine blade and the other one's based on the chicken. So as long as there are no rule updates on this, as it stands right now, they're independent scoring conditions. So the chicken would count in place. So that's a risk versus reward discussion that you would want to have with your teams based on what strategy you want to use.
Okay. And one more, because we are fascinated with the chicken statue. If the chicken statue is moved when delivering the large package, can it be moved back into place by using the robot or an attachment?
So the robot can interact with any objects it wants on the field, as long as it doesn't break them. And in the process of completing one mission, you may spoil another mission. You do have the ability to use the robot or any of its attachments attached to the robot to re-trigger any of those missions. Scoring is done at the end of the match. So indeed, if you, in the process of bringing the turbine blade over or something, you knock the chicken out, and then you have a program that can find the chicken and bring it back, that's absolutely valid because the scoring conditions are always at the end of the match. So it's possible to spoil it and then fix it.
Okay. I think that concludes the questions we have here. And I would point out, and I think you pointed out, Troy, that usually things stay pretty standard and consistent throughout the season, but sometimes there are some people ask some questions globally and we get some sort of, updates on that. So it's certainly important to keep checking that. Troy, we need to move along pretty quickly. Did you have some other tips here?
No, I think that was pretty much it. So I just want to say good luck this season and have fun transporting your team to a new adventure.
Thank you very much.
Good luck to everyone and have fun this season.
This presentation was recorded on October 16, 2021 for the Cargo Connect season and was as accurate as possible on that date. Be sure to check for updated challenge information, rules, and event schedules.